Hey, good morning, everybody. Uh, you able to hear? Yogesh, you're not muted. Okay, I'll mute you. Okay. So, are you able to hear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So, let's get started. We had discussed about the assembly language programming in MIPS computer, and in particular, the procedure calls that we were discussing last time. Let's take few more examples so that it will become clear. We were discussing this example in the last class towards the end, and here we have already integers in an array. Already they are available, and we want to write this routine swap, which will swap the kth element with the k plus 1 element. We can give any k as the argument, and we have to give the starting address of the array. And this is the C code. Now, how do we go about writing the assembly code for this procedure? As we said that the first point to start is we will give the label as swap. And during the call, we'll jump and link to swap. So the address of the array is available in register A0, argument register 0. K is available in argument register A1. Now let's write the code for this. We have made swap as the label so that we can jump and link to swap. And then the first thing we write is the A1 register. If you remember, this contains the value of K. That is, we are going to swap the kth element and the k plus 1 element. Now shift left logical contents of A1 by 2 bits and store the result in T0. And then we add whatever is there in T0 with A0. A0 has the starting address of the array, and we put that in the T1 register. Now, can anybody answer that what are we achieving by this? Or let me just call out a name. I think that's better, so that I know that all of you are keeping up with the class. And Kshitij Agarwal, are you there? Kshitij?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So can you tell what these two lines have achieved? The shift left logical A1 contains K, and add that to A0, which is the start address of the array. What did we achieve by writing these
Sir,
two?
first line gets the byte address from the word address by multiplying by 4. So A1 contains the word address of K and T0 contains the byte address. And next line we get the
Starting
the
address
value
of,
of A plus K, like the array index AK, and store the value in T1.
okay, very good. So basically what Kshitij says is that by doing these two instructions, we have effectively the T1 register contains the address of the kth element of the array. Okay, good. So Kshitij, good, well said. Now let's proceed. We have first got the address of the kth element, and then we load that element. T1 is the address of the kth element, and we load the kth element in T0 register. We don't need the T0 register anymore, so we have used the T0 register. The element at K, we have reused T0 register and loaded it there. And also load word 4T1. So that is the next element, K plus 1 element. So we have got the kth element here and the K plus 1 element here. And now our work is to just interchange them. We'll just store the T0 value in 4T1 and the T3 value in 0T1. Okay, that's what we do. Store word T0 value in 4T1 and T3 contents in 0T1. And we have affected the swap that was required and no return value required. So we just jump register 31. Simple program if we understand. I hope it's clear to everybody. Anybody has any difficulty here in this procedure? We can discuss this if anybody has any difficulty, but this is a simple program. And anybody has any difficulty in the voice, video, or has any doubt, please unmute yourself and let me know. I'm not able to see the chat. If you write in the chat, I don't see because my screen is occupied by the slide. Now let's do one more. Here also we have an array and we want to find the sum of all the elements in the array. Here the address of the array is in register A0 and the number of elements that we want to add is there in the argument K, which is in the A1 register. And our work is to write this simple routine, just one for loop, where we add all the elements here one by one, get them from the memory, add them and accumulate them in the sum, and finally return the sum. And to return the sum, we'll have to copy to the V0 register. Now let's write the code for this, and as usual.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yeah, Balaji, please. Let's.
Sir, here the arguments are int v and int k.
Yes.
Why are A1 register contains the address of k and not the value of k?
No, A1 register contains k. So if we want to add 10 elements, A1 will contain 10. If we want to add 20 elements, A1 will contain 20. And A0 is just the start address of the array. Is it clear, Balaji?
Sorry, sir, I am confused. Okay, fine, it's fine.
Now is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Anybody has any other difficulty here? Okay, let's proceed to write the code for this. As usual, we make find sum as the label and then write the rest of the code. And the first thing is we make T0 register 0 by writing R0 T0. So initially the sum is 0. We will accumulate the sum in the T0 register. And now we will also have variable I, because we have to do for k elements just to keep track how many elements we have added. We'll have this variable I in T2 register. That also is set to 0. Now we have this instruction A0. Remember, A0 contains the address of the array. And we have moved the address of the array into T1 register. We don't have a separate move instruction. We just added 0 to A0 and move to T1. T1 now contains the address of the start element. And we load that element into T3 register. We are careful not to use any saved registers. Otherwise, we'll have to first push the content on the stack. We don't want to do that. We are just using the temporary registers. And we got the first element here. What do we do next? We will add that to T0 to accumulate in the sum. Okay, so we added to T0 and we have got accumulating the sum in the T0 register. Now we have added T1 4 and also T2 with 1. Because T2, remember, it's keeping the count of how many numbers we have added. So initially 0, now T2 has become 1. And T1 is the address and we have added 4. And if T2 is not equal to A1, that is K is not reached. So as long as it is not equal to K, we jump to the loop. Keep on doing this for K times. This is the way the T2 has the count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and up to K. So for K times, we jump to loop. Now series, G series, are you there? I'm just randomly asking, taking up, yeah, series. Can you just tell me that why did we do this T1 added 4 to T1? What does it achieve?
Each word is 4 bytes of data. We are going to the next 4 bytes of data.
No, why did we do this? What does it achieve? We added 4, correct?
Everybody is more than adequate to the sum, right?
Not able to hear. Can you please repeat again?
Am I audible now, sir?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, good. Yeah, tell me now.
Array. We need to add each word of the array to the sum. So for the first word, we add the 0th address, and then we increment it by 4 bytes, and add the next word of the array to the sum.
Okay, very good. So series good. So by adding 4, we have got the next element of the array. Address of the next element of the array. So those who are participating, answering questions, I'm just noting down as usual. And now we have to put the sum. We have completed addition and the T0 now contains the accumulated sum. And we have then the next step is to move the sum to the V0 register, because that's how we will pass the result to the calling routine. And after we have stored the result in V0 register, we will jump back to the calling procedure to the point where it was called. That we do by jump register 31. Now let's do one more problem. This is slightly more difficult and I'll need a lot of help from you. Here we have an array of integers and each integer takes a word that you know. And our work is to reverse the content of the array. So that means, the first element will become the last element will become first element, second element will become last but one, and so on. And here we have already in the calling routine put the address of the array in register A0 and the length of the array here. Length of the array, how many elements are there stored in A1. Now our work is to write the MIPS assembly code. But before we write the MIPS assembly code, we should have the algorithm with us. How do we do this? just reverse the array, the last element become first element, second last become the second element, and so on. But what will be the algorithm for this? Can anybody write a pseudocode or a C code? Or at least describe me that how will we achieve this? How do we reverse the array? You have done this in the first year programming course that I know, but just trying to find out whether you can do. Let me just, should I call randomly or need a volunteer? Let me just try randomly. If that doesn't work, I'll call for a volunteer. So let me just have Ravi Kumar Meena. Ravi, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So can you just roughly outline the algorithm by which we can achieve reversing an integer array?
Reverse. Okay.
What do we do? What will be the steps here?
Like we can use, like, sir, first we will store array in a stack or whatever in linked list. Then we can transfer through the array or linked list.
So you are saying use another storage, right? Now let me just, okay, that may work, but then we don't want to do that. That push all elements into stack and then retrieve without using,
So we can
because
just
the array
keep
can
two
be
pointers
lapsed.
at the 0th index and the k-1th, and then keep swapping them, and then we'll move both the
Yeah,
left
we can
pointer to the
also
right
use
and
any
the right pointer
sorting
to the left,
method,
and
like,
then
Okay. Okay, Ambuj, very good. So I agree to that answer, and I exactly had that same thing here. So we write this small code here. So I am sure that many of you are thinking like Ambuj, that we have this small loop here where we just take the first element and put in the temp, start and end. There are 2 pointers. The first we initialize start to the first element and the end to the last element. And we swap these two. Start content of the start with the contents of the end and vice versa. These are the 3 C statements which achieve this. And then we increment start to the next element and decrement end to the next element. And we keep on doing that until start becomes equal or greater than end. Is it okay for everybody? The algorithm to swap is okay. Anybody has difficulty here? Simple thing. We just initialize these 2 pointers to start and end, and then each time, and then we swap these 2 elements, and then we just move them until they become equal or start becomes greater than the end. Okay. Now let's write the code for this. So as usual, we'll have the name of the routine as the label. Reverse is the label. And then here we have these 2 pointers, which are the most important part of this solution. One is the start and the other is end. And we'll take care of this, we'll take help of this register T0, which will point to the address of the first element. Just copied A0 to T0. And we have added -1 to A1. A1 is the length of the array. And as per C convention, if the number of elements in the array is k, then the k minus 1 will have the address of the last element because the first one is 0. So we reduce the length by 1, that will T1 will contain in the C the last element. It will point to the last element, and we multiply that by 4 to obtain the byte, because we know that load word, store word, they all take byte arguments. And then we added T1 to A0. And this will contain the last element, the address of the last element. T1 will contain the address of the last element. And then our work becomes simple. Once we do this, we have got the first element and the last element. We need to swap them in a loop. Okay, swapping, we already done that. We just copy that to T2 register, another register, and T3 register, the last element. And to swap, we just store them in the reverse way. We store T2 in 0T1 and T3 in 0T0. Now our work, the only work remains is to increment the start address and decrement the last address. But remember here that we need to increment by 4 because each element occupies 4 bytes. Okay, for the last element, we subtracted 4 and okay. So we subtracted 4 from T1, and that decrements the last pointer, and we incremented T0 by 4, that increments the start pointer. And then we have to have this loop conditional here. In the loop conditional, we should continue until T0 is less than T1, or we can use the BGT instruction, branch greater than, until T1 greater than T0. Branch to loop, and as soon as the loop is complete, we have achieved nothing to return here, just swap the array and we will jump register 31. Anybody has any doubt here in this program? If we know, it appears very simple. But then if we don't know, it appears extremely complicated. And just to give you the confidence of writing procedures in the assembly language, we'll just give you few assignments. Anybody has difficulty here?
Sir, can you please explain in the reverse loop SLL $T1 $T1?
See, we have k elements. Let's assume that k is 10. Okay. Now, that is the length. Length is 10, so we reduced it by 1, and 9 is the actual pointer to the last element. But we can't just add 9 to the start address to get the address of the last element, because each element is taking 4 bytes. If it is 9, then we have to multiply with 4 to make it 36. We add 36 to the start address of the array to get the address of the last element. So that is AK. So this is basically to find out how many bytes the last element differs from the first element. If it is 10, length is 10, then it is 9 elements are there. Each element occupies 4. So we have 36. If the address of the first element is 100, then the last element will be at 136. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Madhu, thank you for asking that question. Anybody else has any question?
Sir. Hello.
Yeah, please.
Sir, in BGT instruction,
So
shouldn't
just tell
we
your name. Ansul, right?
Anshul, yes, sir.
Okay, Ansul, yes.
Sir, in BGT instruction, shouldn't we loop back to reverse? Branch back to reverse?
No. See, here we are just stating, we are setting the start pointer to the first element of the array and the T1 to the last element of the array. We have already swapped them, the first and last element. Now we need to swap the second element to the second last element. So if we branch back to the reverse again, we will again do the same thing that we had done. We'll repeat the first element again, we'll swap back. So that will not be correct. We have already achieved this.
Yes, okay, fine.
Some more. Anshul, are you okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else has any other difficulty? Okay, very good. So then I presume that all of you can write routines in MIPS assembly language. And you can always say that I was assembly language programming, I know. And as I said that if you know assembly language programming for one computer, you know for all computers, with small incremental effect. And also the assembly write code is very important for compilers, those who do a compiler course, because finally you will have to generate code, something like 3 address instructions and so on. Now let's have this assignment. We'll request the TAs to set up the assignment, to upload this in the assignment link so that everybody can submit the code. They need not mail me. Who will do this? Jyoti, are you there? Jyoti? Who is the TA who is present? What about Taisi? Aditya? Okay, I think the TAs are not there today. I'll just request them to set up the link so that you can submit. So here the first one, we have an integer array. So here we'll pass the address of the array and the last element, the number of elements. So so the two arguments here are the address of the array and the number of elements in the array. And our work here is to find the largest number in the array. Small program, maybe 8-10 lines of MIPS code. The second one is just a small extension of the first program. Here we want to determine the largest odd integer in the array. So here just a small change there. We can just modify the previous code a little bit so that we get the largest odd integer. And the third one is segregating the odd and even numbers in the array without changing their relative positions among each. So the odd numbers, their relative positions remain same. Even numbers, and for each of these we don't take care of an external storage like stack, etc. We don't need them. We'll just do in place. So these three, we'll have the TH set up the link for submission. Please write the code. It will give you the confidence that you can write assembly code. Please do it on your own. Now we have completed the chapter 2 of the book. I hope you are reading the book as well. And the book has a large number of exercises at the end. Please do the exercises. Now we'll start the chapter 3 of the book. And here for the chapter 3, we'll follow the slides more or less because this is a standard topic. We'll follow the slides given by the book almost entirely, only small changes we'll do here and there. Now, we won't take much time on this chapter 3 because this is a more standard topic, maybe 2 classes or something. And then we'll look deeper into hardware. This itself will give us insight into the hardware of the ALU. Now, in the arithmetics of computers, we'll first discuss the operations on the integer and how to achieve them. Addition and subtraction, multiplication and division, and also whenever there is an overflow during the operation, we will see what to do about that. And also we look at the floating point real numbers. How are they represented? That's the first thing. We'll look at the IEEE floating point standard used in in every computer, the IEEE floating point standard. As we were discussing that some things never became a standard, like Big Endian, Little Endian, and so on. People used, the different vendors used different ways as per their convenience. But then this is one thing that has remained standard and everybody is bound to this. The floating point IEEE standard, very important, like many times you also get questions in exams and so on. And if you are appearing in AGRE or something, you may get questions in IEEE floating point representation. And we'll look at the representation and operation on floating point, and these two expected to take about 2 hours. We won't spend much time in the chapter. The chapter is not doesn't appear very short in the book, but then I know that all of you will be easy to grasp this. Some aspects you know already. We'll quickly go through this. Unless you feel that we need to slow down, then just let me know. We will slow down, but I don't think that will be necessary. Just let's start with that. The first thing is about ripple carry addition of 2's complement numbers. You all have done this in your first year, remember. And here 7 plus 6, the carry we keep on adding, ripple carry. But then how do we handle the overflow? If the result is out of range, how do we check the overflow and how do we handle it? One simple rule to remember is that if we are adding a positive number to a negative number, there cannot be overflow because it will be less than both of them. It will be less than the positive number and also it will be more than the negative number. So adding positive and negative operand, we can do that confidently. There will be no overflow. Overflow can occur if we are adding 2 positive numbers. But then how do we check the overflow? If we add 2 positive number and find that the result is negative, then only there is overflow. And that is easy to check. We just check whether the last bit has become 1. The result has a sign 1. The sign bit has become 1. We're adding 2 positive numbers with 0 as the sign. The MSB as 0, and we find that the MSB has become 1, then there is a overflow. And similarly, there can be overflow when adding 2 negative numbers if we find that the result is positive. So two negative numbers, we know that the MSB is 1. We did the add operation and find that the MSB has become 0. And then we know there is overflow. But what do we do if there is overflow? We'll just check that. What do we do when there is overflow? But let's look at the subtraction. We don't have a separate subtraction hardware. We use the adder. But then we have a complementation operation. We do a negation, not complementation. We do a negation. We know the 2's complement negation. So to subtract 6 from 7, typically the hardware, not typically, always, the hardware will not have a separate subtraction unit. Even when we manually subtract something, 2's complement number, we never really do a subtraction. We just take the complement of 6, negate 6. So once we have 6, the 6 negation, if you work out, it will be this number, and then we do a add. Now, since subtraction is also kind of addition, so if we are subtracting, we can just rewrite what we are writing the overflow condition for the 2 integer addition. We can say that subtracting 2 positive or 2 negative operands, there will be no overflow because one of them will become positive, right? Subtracting 2 positive numbers from each other, there are 2 positive numbers, and to subtract, the one will become negative. And similarly, if there are 2 negative operands, so one of them will positive. So there can be never an overflow. Just a small extension of what we discussed in the last slide. But if we are subtracting a positive from a negative operand, so the result should be negative. But if we find that the result is positive, sign bit is 0, then there is overflow. And similarly, subtracting a negative number from a positive number, we expect that the number is positive. Basically addition of 2 positive number. But if we find that the sign has become 1, it's negative, then there is a overflow. So we know how to check the overflow. But what do we do if there is overflow? In many languages like C, etc., they ignore overflow. They don't do anything. Basically, they have to use a add unsigned, etc., subtract unsigned, etc., so that nothing untoward happens. Overflow is ignored. But other languages, if there is an overflow, then there is an exception, need to be handled. And typical add immediate, subtract immediate instructions in the MIPS, they require raising an exception. And once an exception occurs, then we'll have to save the program counter value in the exception program counter and jump to a predefined handler address. And then once it is handled, then we move back to the last program counter by writing this assembly instruction, move from coprocessor register. We will not really write program using this. It's just for our knowledge that there can be exception and it is handled by using a exception program counter where we store the program counter, handle the exception, and then we start processing from the saved program counter value. Another element is the arithmetic for multimedia. As you know, all of you, that 20, 30 years back, the desktops were not like this. They had very little video. Even graphics was poor and audio was not there. But suddenly all the laptops and desktops have become multimedia enabled computers. You can watch videos, high resolution graphics, and so on. How did it happen? Okay, so here they had processing support for multimedia. But before we discuss about how multimedia can be processed, the most important thing possibly here is that all this media, like a graphics, let me just tell about a picture, has pixels. And these pixels are in a two-dimensional array. But one good thing about these pixels is that the intensity vector there, the intensity value, can be represented using 8-bit. If you are talking of a very high resolution picture with color and so on, hue, saturation, and all those values, then possibly we need a 16-bit. We never need a 64-bit to handle either graphics, that is pictures, or video or audio. These are all short integers. And to do efficient processing of this multimedia, we cannot use our normal add instruction and so on. Then we will not get the speed. We need to split our registers into multiple elements, and simultaneously we can do add on each of these. So this is a 32-bit register, like MIPS register, and we have split it into 4 parts. Each one is 8-bit. So if it is a 64-bit adder, then we can have 8 into 8-bit, or 4 into 16-bit, or 2 into 32-bit. And this operation simultaneously on 4 or 8 values, we have stored these values in one register, and in one add operation we will add multiple elements, and this is called as single add instruction on multiple data elements. And the graphical processing units, you might have heard about GPUs, because now every laptop or a desktop has a GPU. They help us achieve this excellent quality video, audio, and so on. This is due to the GPU. And these GPUs, they can operate still more elements in one time, hundreds of elements. Here in typical MIPS register, we can handle 4. They can operate on 256 or something. So this is called as the SIMD processing, single instruction, multiple data. But one thing about these operations is that they are saturating operations. There is no overflow here basically, because if we add 2 large numbers, they set at the largest value. If we add 2 negative numbers, they set at the most negative value. Just like a knob, volume knob, we just keep on incrementing, and still it volume knob, or let's say a increment volume button on your mobile, we keep on incrementing the volume, but it saturates at the largest value. So the same type of saturating operations for the multimedia. And in a higher level course, we normally discuss about the GPUs and the graphics processing, audio video processing. But here we don't really look much deeper into them other than this one slide where we just saw that how multiple elements of graphics or audio sample are handled together. Now let's look at the multiplication. How do we do this in hardware? We all have done this in our first year, that we have this multiplicand and we have the multiplier, and then each time we take out a bit from the multiplier, multiply with the multiplicand, but on each operation we shift it one bit to the left, finally add it, and we get the product. Now if we have a multiplicand of m bits and a multiplier of n bits, what will be the number of bits in the product? M plus n. I hope everybody will be able to answer. Anybody has doubt here? Okay, written here also. Length of the product is sum of the bits in the multiplicand and multiplier. Now let's look at the hardware we use to achieve the multiplication. If you, Ambuj, yes.
So for this representation shown in the left, is it not a 2's complement representation? Because the addition is done directly. It is.
Yeah, no. Right now, we will ignore about the sign. We will first understand the basic multiplication, and then we will put back the sign and all that stuff, 2's complement. We'll just understand the basic multiplier, because if we start doing all that, it will become extremely complicated. Don't want to get into that. Good question, Ambuj. But then right now we will just do the basic multiplication. We will not consider the sign. These are all unsigned number. We will not discuss about the signed multiplication. But once we know that how do we handle unsigned multiplication, adding the sign will be relatively easier. We'll just see that if the two signs are different, then we'll put as negative. If the two signs are the same, then we'll put as positive. So the last bit will keep it as 0 or 1. Otherwise, it is the same as the unsigned number. Is it okay, Ambuj? We'll first discuss the unsigned multiplication. Okay, good question. Now let's look at the hardware. So here we know that if we are multiplying two 32-bit integers, we are expecting 64-bit results. And therefore we'll use a 64-bit ALU, and we'll store the multiplicand in this register at the top. And just observe here that each step we are either adding the multiplicand itself left shifted, or we are just adding 0, which is basically left shifting the multiplicand. In other words, if I tell the algorithm for this, if I look at this and tell the algorithm, I will say that in each time you look at the last bit of the multiplier, and then you add to the multiplicand and shift the multiplicand left 1 bit. And the next one you check. If it is 0, don't do any addition. If it is 1, then add the multiplicand. So each time you shift the multiplicand. So my algorithm will be that I check out the multiplier least significant bit. If it is 1, I add the multiplicand to the product. Initially product is 0. And then I shift the multiplier 1 bit right and the multiplicand 1 bit left. And then I check if it is 0. I don't do any addition. Shift the multiplicand 1 bit left, and so on. And as soon as I have completed all the bits of the multiplier, I will have my result ready. Is this algorithm okay with everybody? I just observed this multiplication that is here. I just observed this is the algorithm that we, based on the LSB of the multiplier. If it is 1, we add the multiplicand and then we shift the multiplicand 1 bit left and shift the multiplier 1 bit right to checking the LSB value of the multiplier. If it is 0, do no addition. Only shift the multiplicand 1 bit left and multiplier 1 bit right. Is the algorithm looking okay with everybody? Simple algorithm, just observation on this. So if we understood that algorithm, then our work is simple. We keep the multiplicand on the 32 least significant bits on the right side of this 64-bit register, and we made the product 0. We keep the multiplier here in this register, and in each clock cycle we do the following things. We take out the multiplier last bit. We check the last bit here, and if it is 1, then we enable this adder. This adder adds the multiplicand to the product. And then we shift the multiplicand 1 bit, multiplier 1 bit, right 1 bit, multiplicand left 1 bit. And then again do that same thing, that we check if it is 0, do nothing, don't enable the addition. We have this enable signal here. Either we add or don't add. We enable if it is 1, we disable if it is 0, no addition takes place. But each time we just shift the multiplicand left 1 bit and the multiplier right 1 bit. And after we have done for all 32 bits, we are done. Is this hardware okay with everybody? Is it understandable, the hardware? We have an adder, and the adder symbol is this. And we have this register, 3 registers, and there is a control circuit here. We call the control circuit as control and test, which basically does the implementation of the algorithm, that each time it checks and the last bit, and then it shifts left, shifts right, all that it does. Is this hardware okay with everybody? Now just want to ask one question. Let me just ask this time to Bandit Sarma. Bandit, are you there? Bandit?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, Bandit, how many cycles will it take for the multiplication to complete? How many cycles do we need in this hardware? We don't use this hardware actually. This is the extremely simple hardware to understand. We'll see optimized hardware. If we understand this, we can understand the other hardware. Otherwise, it will be extremely difficult because that's optimized one. So, Bandit, can you tell me how many cycles it will take to multiply two 32-bit numbers, unsigned numbers?
Is it clear?
See, the work involved is that in each cycle, just mark my words, in each cycle, we do for 1 bit that we take out the rightmost bit, we check the rightmost bit, and based on that we shift left, we add this multiplicand to the product and then do the shift left and then shift right. This is the step we do every cycle. So how many cycles will it take? Bandit?
So
Think again. See, each time we are checking 1 bit on the multiplier and doing the required operation. That is 4 steps in each cycle we are doing. For each bit, we are taking one cycle, and there are 32 bits here.
Mm.
So we'll need 32 cycles, right, Bandit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So for multiplication, we are able to do two 32-bit number multiplication in 32, but division will be much more difficult. So we are at the end of this today's lecture. Please read the book. We are almost going line by line from the book actually, but unfortunately Patterson and Hennessy, they're not the best writers, because sometimes they write so cryptically, it becomes difficult for students to understand. But I hope that I made the point clear here about the hardware. And the optimized hardware, they have just shown the figure, they have not even explained that. Bit surprising, but I will discuss the optimized hardware next, and we'll stop here. We'll continue in the next class. Monday we'll have a quiz, and in Monday we'll have the MIPS assembly programming again with procedure calls and the normal MIPS. So that will be our last quiz on MIPS assembly. So we'll have a quiz on Monday. Thank you all.
Excuse me.
Yeah, please.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, can you give some more time on test because writing code in assembly takes some time.
Yeah. See, the problem is this online thing. This test. See, normally teachers, we have conducted several exams physically and here, and we know that there are students who complete very quickly. And if we give enough, see, normally in the normal test, we set the question so that the average student is able to complete and have some time to revise. But in this online test, no, the problem is that as soon as one student, say some students complete very fast, because each time you see that they are getting almost a full mark. And these students know what they do is that once they complete, they just pass on the result. So we are just scared of that. This online, we have this bottleneck, where this handicap, and we are just setting the time aggressively so that nobody completes and has enough time to just pass around the answers. So, but then remember that the final grading will be relative, and also since it is online, I know that it is not as good as a real class. So we are very relaxed in the grading. Normally, what grade we give for D grade or P grade, here it becomes C grade or B grade. Normally don't give less than that unless somebody has not answered anything. So we are relaxed on grading, and it is relative grading, but we set the question aggressively. Don't worry if your mark is less, your grade will not correspond to your mark. You will slightly surprised to see the grade with your performance. Don't worry about the grade. So, but the questions are aggressive. And I know that it becomes a bit of pressure to answer so many assembly questions, writing code, but then it's a relative and will not change that. Again, it will be slightly aggressively. All the quizzes, the time is aggressively set. Sorry for that, Abrar. Okay, thank you all. We'll stop here.
Sir?
Yeah, yes, please. Anybody else would like to have any comments? Yes.
For all the tests we have written till now?
Yes. Are you able to see the marks on all the tests?
I'm not able to see. Have you shared them?
No, sorry, Siris, your voice is not very audible. Can you tell louder?
No, sir. I'm not able to see the marks that for all the tests we have written.
Acha, I'll tell the TS. I'll tell the TS that see, normally the marks are out almost 1 or 2 days after the quiz. They mail me, and I didn't know that. I just asked them that whether all students are able to see their mark. They said yes. I'll just check them that all students should see their marks for all quizzes, so that later there is no controversy. And also, If there is any difficulty in the correction, you just first correspond with the TS. And if it is not resolved, you are not happy with their resolution, send me a mail. I will get it resolved. Normally we don't look at quizzes which are old, like first quiz, second quiz, etc. 1 or 2 quizzes, okay, fine, we'll just look at it. But don't send me that in the first quiz I didn't get mark. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you all.